Today we're going to be talking about assessing new market opportunities for Montana farm businesses. I like to start a marketing presentation with this picture that I took at the Montana Historical Museum from an old homesteading ad for the Montana Territory. You can see, hopefully you can see in the picture, the farmer is plowing gold coins right out of the ground. And unfortunately, agriculture doesn't quite work like this. And that's why marketing strategy is a key part of any successful farm or ranch business. So I'm excited to work with all of you today. My name is Dave Renn. I'm the Beginning Farmer and Rancher Program Manager at the Community Food and Agriculture Coalition. We work with beginning farmers and ranchers to assist them with the business planning portions of starting new farm and ranch operations. We also manage the FarmLink Montana resource webpage that has resources and helpful map-based listings for beginning farmers and ranchers. My farming experience has come in Oregon and Washington and here in Montana, working on farms primarily in the specialty crops sector, mixed vegetables and perennial berries and cane fruits. I also spent some seasons organically raising pastured poultry. So our goals for today's talk are fourfold. First, we want to understand what is niche marketing and how can it benefit a farm or ranch business. Second, we'll learn how to identify niche marketing opportunities for your farm or ranch business. Third, we'll learn methods to research and assess the market for those niche products that we've identified. And then fourth, we'll learn how to create a market positioning statement to guide your marketing strategy. So we'll start by talking about what is niche marketing. So what are niche markets? Quite simply, niche markets are subsets of a consumer audience. So this just on a very basic level means that we're breaking the market down into specific targeted groups that we can understand a little bit better so that our marketing can be more effective. Niche marketing in agriculture can happen in all kinds of ways, and I've put some of the most common up here, the most common categories up here. So specialty products could include unique breeds or varieties that you're producing. Can also include new products. In Montana right now, that might be hops production, or Haskap berries is another exciting new product that a lot of people are putting in and trying to identify the right markets for those products. Direct markets could include farmers markets or farm stands. Value-added production could be processing raw goods into ingredients. It could also be retail products like pickles and sauces. Agritourism can include things like farm stays, corn mazes, on-farm events, or farm-to-table events. And then labels and certifications. I think most commonly we tend to think of the organic certification from the USDA, but there are so many other labels and certifications out there about humane practices and sustainability. Also things that identify the producers themselves, such as the Homegrown by Heroes label for veteran farmers. So why niche marketing? What can it do for your operation? Well, niche marketing may be an essential strategy to market a unique product effectively. If your product is new to consumers, it might take some extra marketing effort to inform them about why they might want to purchase it. Niche marketing gives you the opportunity to be a price maker as opposed to a price taker. So when you identify your markets, you get to define the value of your product through that market targeting, and then you get to set the price for that product and have a little bit more control in that regard. Niche marketing can help to create a more resilient business by having multiple market channels or multiple products. Your farm business becomes less reliant on one particular product succeeding in a given season. And that can help to avoid some of the risk of seasonal variability and market turmoil. Um, Niche markets can expand your business to include the next generation. For example, the Mannix family ranch in Helmville reports that since they added their grass-finished beef enterprise, they've seen more interest from the younger generations in their family in finding ways to become involved in the operation going forward. You can also utilize more of the talents of your farm team. So niche marketing opportunities make lots of ways for folks with non-production talents in your family or on your farm team to get involved, and we'll talk more about that as we go along. And finally, you probably have a niche product already. There are things that make every farm and ranch business unique, and we're going to talk about how you can identify marketing opportunities in those uniqueness factors. So marketing is where we add value. And it's not about tricking consumers, it's just about letting them know what the value in your product is and how it can benefit them. I want to sort of talk about marketing activities and the continuum that exists here, because I think it's important before we get started to recognize that niche marketing isn't a an either or choice. This isn't something that you do or you don't do. It works on a continuum that we can see here, where you have the option to invest more or less time and money into marketing, and you should be able to return more or less value from those activities. So it is important to note that the line should always be trending upward. So the more time and money you spend on marketing, the more value that you should be returned. And if you find yourself spending more time and money on marketing and not increasing the value returned, then that's a really strong sign that those are not good marketing activities. But I want to illustrate how this continuum works with an example, and I'm going to use the example of Quinn Farms and Kamut International. Bob Quinn farms in Fort Benton, and I would say he speaks fairly often at farm meetings and events, so you might have heard this story from him already. Quinn Farms, like most grain operations, started out growing wheat and selling it by the bushel at the elevator. And Bob Quinn likes to talk about how he wanted to find a way to get a little more value out of his product. And what they decided to do was to build some infrastructure to mill the wheat into flour. And as Bob says, this allowed them to start selling their wheat by the pound instead of by the bushel, and returning a little bit more profit on the product. And this is a great example of niche marketing, but they weren't done yet. They recently released a product called Crackle and Kamut. And as Bob says, this gives them the opportunity to sell their wheat by the ounce rather than by the pound, and be even more profitable. Crackle and Kamut, if you're not familiar, it's sort of like corn nuts. It's like a snack, a crunchy, salty wheat snack. This example is not meant to demonstrate that Crackle and Kamut is the best option for niche marketing, but more to show that they were able to invest more time and money into the marketing to return higher value on their product. But there were several options for Quinn Farms and Kamut International in terms of marketing activities and value returned. So always remember that when you're thinking about marketing, it should match up to your values and your goals for your farm, and you'll find the sweet spot on this continuum that works for your operation. So now that we've talked a little bit about what it is, let's talk about how you can identify niche marketing opportunities on your farm. So we're going to look at a couple of marketing frameworks today. And the first we're going to look at is Ansof's market growth framework. Igor Ansof was a marketing thinker in the last century, and one of the things that he spent some time working on was how to organize thinking about market opportunities. And he designed this framework for businesses that already had an established product that were thinking about ways to increase their market share. But this framework can also be useful for someone who's just starting their operation and considering an array of products or markets and trying to decide which ones they're going to pursue. So The market growth framework divides market opportunities by markets and products. And as you can see on the bottom, it's split into current markets that the company is already accessing and new markets. And on the left-hand side, we see that it's divided by current products and new product possibilities. So in the first quadrant here, we see penetration. And this is where you pursue market opportunities with current products and current markets. So thinking about the folks that are already buying your products and how you can sell more to them. And these are the easiest strategies for adding new market channels, because you already have the product, you're already present in those markets, and they tend to require the least input. Next up, we look at the development opportunities, so product development and market development. Product development is adding new products in markets that you're already present in. And market development, of course, is exploring new markets for your current products. And each of these involves moving into a new sector, either developing a new product or making inroads into a new market or establishing a new market presence. So these take a little bit more work. They can be a little bit more challenging, but there is a higher potential for return because you're accessing new markets or you're bringing a brand new product and all those accompanying sales opportunities to the market. Finally, we have up here diversification. And really, the product development and market development categories here would be part of diversifying your farm operation. But what Ansoff referred to as true diversification is a new product in a new market. So these are going to require the most work because you're doing product development and entering new markets. But this is also the sector where you have the highest potential for impact and market expansion for your operation. So using this framework to organize ideas can be really helpful to quickly assess their potential. And we'll go ahead and walk through an example to further illustrate how this might work, how this might look for a farm. And I'm going to use the example of a vegetable grower producing baby lettuces and selling them as a salad mix. So this farm, and again, it could be somebody just planning to go into that business. They might be thinking about ways that they can increase their penetration, and considering something like a loyalty card. So this little coupon says buy 10 salads and get any salad free. I guess it's not so much a coupon as a punch card, but they might have noticed that shoppers come to the farmer's market and buy salad from them some weeks, but other weeks they buy it at a different stand, maybe because they're already there buying beets or something like that. And this is a way that they can motivate those shoppers to come and shop at their stand more often. So clearly, a very simple operation. They make a little card and print it out to sell more to those existing customers. Now, they might be thinking about a new product that they could bring to sell to those customers to increase their sales there. And they might be looking at a line of salad dressings. I don't know very many folks who eat salad greens without putting some kind of a dressing on it. So this is a natural fit for their current markets and their current customers with a new product. Now, they might think about new market opportunities for their current products. And since they're currently selling their salad mixes at the farmer's market, with a little research and investment into new packaging, as you can see in the picture here, we've got salad greens in clam shells, which makes them really appealing to a retail customer because they're so easy to handle and their shelf life is great. So this is a way that they can start selling their current products all week in the grocery store in a new marketplace. Now, finally, they might be thinking, I'm really good at growing lettuce, and I know what makes good lettuce, but I can't grow it in January, and my cash flow runs out then. And this farmer might think about growing lettuce for seed that they can sell to gardeners and other salad producers, so that they can, clean and sell that seed in January when they can't grow salad mix, and this will really help with their cash flow. So there's a really high potential return for the business here, a really high potential impact. However, they are thinking about a new product. They're going to have to adjust production systems to produce this, and they're also going to have to create relationships in a new market sector with seed buyers or home gardeners. So while this could have a really great impact on the farm business, they can quickly see using the framework here that idea is probably going to take the most time investment. So the next framework we're going to look at is really helpful in understanding some of these ideas that you might already be coming up with a little bit better. This is the 3 C's of marketing, and as you can see, the 3 C's refer to customer, company, and competition. We're going to talk through each of these and how we can think about them. We're going to start by talking about the customer, because really the most effective marketing strategies focus primarily on the customer. The customer is the one who's going to be making the purchasing decision, and so the best marketing strategies really start by identifying how they're making choices and what they're looking for. So Ted Levitt, another marketing thinker, said, "People don't buy a 1/4-inch drill, they buy a 1/4-inch hole." And this is a really great line that's referring to customers' wants and needs, or sometimes this will be referred to as pains and gains. And this is the idea that, customers don't buy a thing because of that thing. They buy the thing because of what they're hoping to get out of it or what they want to do with it. So they might have a want or a need, in this case drilling a 1/4-inch hole, and they need to buy the 1/4-inch drill bit for that one. They might also have sort of a pain or a gain in mind, so something that's challenging in their life that they're looking for a solution to. And so by thinking about these wants and needs and not stopping just at wow, I raised a really healthy steer. That's a good one. People will want that. But thinking more specifically about, well, why would the customer want this specific steer or this specific product? And how can I enhance and market based on those traits? So here I think is a really interesting example of thinking about wants and needs for a customer. This is a bouquet of wheat, and I took this screenshot from an Etsy shop. Etsy is an online retail site that focuses mainly on craft items. And this bouquet of wheat is being marketed to customers in urban areas who are putting on events, oftentimes weddings, and looking for sort of a rustic agrarian theme to their event, but they're not able to travel to a farm, or maybe they can't ask all of their guests to travel to a farm. So this allows them to bring in some decorations for the tables and the room that can give that feel and that experience on that site without having to travel as far. So the desire of the customer is to kind of create that experience and capture maybe some nostalgia that folks attending the event might have for maybe the community that they grew up in. So not just stopping at, well, this is wheat, and as we all know, wheat is something that you eat, but thinking creatively about how they can access an additional market. Now, of course, selling bouquets of wheat is not going to be a strategy to sell the entire harvest from your acreage, but this can be a really great way to diversify the opportunities and to create an opportunity for someone else on the farm team who might be creative, who might be able to put these together and ship them out to be a part of the operation in a little bit more meaningful way. So next up we'll talk about, so we've talked about the customer wants and needs, and now we'll talk about your company and how you can look for ways that you might be able to satisfy some of those wants and needs. So what makes your business unique? And we can divide this up into a couple of categories. Again, just a simple framework to sort of help organize our thoughts around these marketing strategies. We can start by looking at your business for assets and skills that could be particularly useful here. So an asset, as you can see, is something that your farm possesses. while a skill is something that your farm does, and ideally it's something that you do better than your competitors. It's something unique about the farm. So let's talk about assets. We can break these down a little bit further into a few categories here: land and location, infrastructure, and affiliations. The land and location assets could include proximity to a major route or a landmark. You might be in a scenic area, or there could be some special history in your specific area. These assets can be really useful in an agritourism venture, or in terms of assessing your access to direct market opportunities. In the middle box under infrastructure, we have processing, spare buildings on site, equipment that you might use in your operation, but you could utilize further. So again, some of these assets can help with agritourism. They can also be particularly useful for thinking about value-added enterprises in that processing category. Affiliations is sort of the last area that's worth taking a hard look at. We talked about how your affiliations with groups can be beneficial for labels and certifications. If you're a veteran or a tribal member, there are some special certifications that you can put on your products. But also affiliations with organizations in your community might create opportunities for marketing or testing products, as we'll talk about in a little bit. So let's talk about an example of assets, and this is an agritourism example from Foothill Farm in St. Ignatius. So as you can see here, they had a couple of assets going for them: a building on the farm that they could turn into an Airbnb opportunity, and proximity to a major route on the way to a landmark. So you can see in the little map there on the bottom, they're right on the way to Glacier National Park from Seattle, and that's a pretty long drive for one day, but the Foothill Farm is in a nice spot to drive out to the farm, stay the night, and then drive up to the park in the morning. And they thought that the farmers there thought that this would be a great opportunity to add another revenue stream to the farm. And it has been a really successful venture for the farm. However, the assets that really benefited them the most were a little bit different than what they were expecting. So they found, as they've rented this cabin out over the years, that they don't get as many folks on their way to Glacier as they thought they would. And the assets that they overlooked, it turned out, were the porch that you can see there right on the cabin, and the scenic location of their farm. So a lot of their guests actually come just to stay at the farm and to have a peaceful vacation away from their busy lives, whatever they're usually doing. And so sometimes we can overthink these things a little bit, but the good news is there's flexibility in the strategies. So really keep an open mind and an open eye when you're looking for those assets. Now, thinking about skills, we could probably spend the whole hour talking about different skills and how you might capitalize on those. So I have a short list here of some different categories that are worth thinking about. So think about if you have any special production skills. And these might come in handy in terms of producing a specialty product like we talked about, or qualifying for a certification, such as organic or some other that relates to the way that you're producing products. Organizational and communication skills, sometimes these are referred to as soft skills, can be particularly useful if you're thinking about an ag tourism venture where you're going to be interacting with guests and lots of customers. Cooking and artistic skills come up fairly often for folks who are thinking about value-added opportunities. And then computer skills is one that you should never overlook in today's marketplace. There's so many ways that computer skills can be useful in enhancing your current operations, but also in finding new market opportunities. So a couple of examples here. On the right at the top, we see Jesse Haddon from Lower Crossing Farm. And he's standing in front of the farm's farm to food truck. It's called Take It or Leave It. And this gives Lower Crossing Farm an opportunity to increase the value that they receive for their farm's meat from their livestock operation. And it also has created an opportunity for Jesse's partner Jamie to get involved in the operation. She manages the food truck while Jesse focuses more on the livestock and butchering sides of things. So they're involving more of the team in that way. You can also see here another screenshot, this one taken from a farm that's selling their grains in an online store. And again, they're almost certainly not selling all of their grain this way in the web store. But if you have some computer skills in your farm team, online stores are a relatively low overhead option. It doesn't cost much to put something like this up and sort of see how it does. And so that can be a really great opportunity. So we've talked about customer wants and needs, and we've talked about your company's uniqueness factors, and where these two overlap, that's where we identify the unique product, I apologize for that, that you might be able to provide to the marketplace. Now it's also important to think about that third C, the competition, and how you will position your product compared to the other opportunities in the market. This is called your point of differentiation. What makes your product different? So when we think about competition, I'm going to talk about 4 ways that you can compare yourself to the competition to help think strategically about how you stack up with your with the product that you're planning. But before I talk about those, I want to talk about this note right at the top of the slide about frame of reference. So anytime you're thinking about competition, it's really important to have a clear frame of reference in mind. And that just means where will you be selling this product, and so what are the other products that consumers are going to be comparing yours to? And I think a useful example is to think about selling something in the grocery store versus selling it at a farmer's market. If you're bringing a product to the grocery store and you can let the consumer know that that's a local product, that's a really great way to differentiate in that frame of reference. The majority of the products in the grocery store come from around the country or around the world, and so being a local product in that space it can really be a competitive advantage. However, if you take that same product and you move to a different frame of reference, to the farmer's market, now almost every product either is local or is perceived to be local because it's at the farmer's market. And marketing on the fact that your product is local is no longer gonna make you stand out. So it's really important to have in mind what the frame of reference for your product is going to be. And it's not just a physical space when we talk about frame of reference, but this could be just in how you talk about your product. What are you comparing it to? That would be your frame of reference. So let's talk about the 4 aspects of the product that we like to focus on. So the first is price, and this one is pretty straightforward and familiar to all of us. If your product is more affordable, you're going to be really competitive on price. Second is thinking about the product. Is your product of higher quality or rare or maybe unique in a certain way that would make it stand out as a product? Thinking about access, if your product is easier to get or it's available to consumers more often, those would be ways to compete on access. For example, a farm stand is going to be more competitive in terms of access than a farmer's market that's only open 1 day per week. And finally, service. So this is one where you can really get creative. Are there ways that you can customize your product for different consumers, or maybe just take that that extra step to be, the friendliest, easiest to reach in the market. Those things can really make you stand out in the mind of a consumer. So those are kind of the four areas to focus on, and it can be really tempting to see these four and just want to be the best at all of them, to just want to compete on all of these fronts, because we don't really want to be bad at any of these things, and that's true. We don't want to be bad at any of these categories, but in terms of a marketing strategy, it's actually more effective to focus on one or two. So here at CFAC, we recommend that you try to be the best at one of these. Try to be very good at another one, and then make sure that you're on par on the other two. So again, you don't want to be bad in any of these areas, because it's just easier to leave a bad impression in a consumer's mind than a positive one. So we don't want to leave any of those. But marketing is all about standing out in the marketplace and leaving a lasting impression with customers. And by focusing your energy and your efforts on one of these areas, you'll find that your marketing efforts are more effective in standing out. So now we've gone through those three C's. So first we identified opportunities and talked about ways to look at your operation and your customers and identify those opportunities. We thought about how they fit in with the customer's wants and needs, and with your company's capacity and skills and assets. And then we looked at how those unique products compare to the competition in your marketplace. All right, and Carrie, that's the stopping point right there.
Okay. Okay, go ahead.
All right. So now we'll talk about how you can test these ideas in the real world, and learn a little bit more about the customer's competition and market opportunities. So anytime you're going to be doing market research, it's really important to think about the end goal. So when we're conducting market research, we're going to gather information or data that's going to increase your knowledge about a certain aspect, and lead to an action that you can take in your marketing plan or your production planning. And it's really important to identify what that action is before you start collecting information, so that you can make sure you're collecting the right information. So Mark Twain said, data is like garbage. You better know what you're going to do with it before you collect it. And that's really true with market research. It can get pretty overwhelming when you just start collecting information. Can lead to a lot of second guessing. So having a real specific goal in mind can help to keep the process focused and save you some time. So you want to think about, what decisions do I need to make? Are you trying to learn more about customers or competition, or just the marketplaces? And what information do you need to make those decisions? So when you walk into the market to try to learn about the opportunities there, having something specific in mind that you're going to go look at, whether it's a specific product or specific elements of how it's maybe being packaged or displayed. Those kinds of really specific goals can help to make the market research process a little bit more fun and a little bit less overwhelming. So there's an adage in marketing: if you try to market to everyone, you'll end up marketing to no one. And this has a lot to do with the idea of standing out in the marketplace. So it's really important to think about those those aspects of your product and those needs that you've identified or wants in the customers that you're going to go after, and make sure that you're identifying customers who that really is going to appeal to, and then speaking to them in your marketing approaches. When you try to speak to everyone, then your message gets a little bit muddled, and it just won't end up being as memorable or standing out as well. Another marketing framework here is STP, which stands for segmenting, targeting, and positioning. And this is the process that you can use to hone in your marketing strategy as you're doing your research. So segmenting, as you can see, is when you break down the market in relation to your product. So this is where you're going to think about those customers that are out there and break them into groups, different customers that might want products like yours. Targeting is quite simply choosing from those segments which of those groups are you going to pursue with your product. And the final step, positioning, this is how you'll show your segment that you have the product for them. So let's talk about some different ways of segmenting a market. And the first two we're going to look at here, demographic segmentation and geographic segmentation. So demographics, you're probably familiar with. They get discussed fairly often in marketing and in politics as well. So things like gender and age, family units, education and income levels. Geographic segments obviously include the region where folks live, but can also include some factors like climate or urban versus rural. The urban versus rural segment was particularly important for the example earlier of the wheat bouquets, where those weren't going to be nearly as popular in a place where folks could just step out their door and be in farm country. Similarly, climate could be a key factor if you're thinking about a value-added product that's hot or cold, like popsicles or soup. The other two categories of segments that marketers use are psychographic and behavioral. So psychographic includes things like the activities, interests, and values of the customer. Behavioral segments include the benefits that are sought by those individuals in the market, or things like their expertise level. That one can be particularly useful in the wine industry, where a more expert consumer is going to have a better understanding of the product and why they might pay more for it than somebody who doesn't know much about wine. Also, desire for variety is one there. So we sort of have these grouped into two different groups here, with demographic and geographic at the top together, because those two are the easiest segments to collect. I'm going to talk in a second here about where you can go to find all of this information. Psychographic and behavioral, grouped at the bottom, are much more difficult to identify and to quantify. Companies spend huge marketing budgets on surveys and processes to gather this kind of information about their customers. And generally, this kind of market research is beyond the scope of a farm or ranch business. However, we will talk about some strategies you can use to sometimes glean a little bit of this information from somebody else's marketing. We'll talk about that in a minute here. So first, let's talk about those demographics. And as I said, these are some of the easiest data points to collect as you're doing your market research. And that's because they're collected in the US Census. So US Census data is available online, and it's easier than ever to access this information thanks to a product that they've added called the Census Business Builder. And the best way to get to the Census Business Builder is just to get on Google or whichever search engine you like to use. Type type in this phrase, Census Business Builder, and it's going to be the top result that comes up, or one of the top couple. You'll follow that link. There are two options, and you'll want to select the Small Business Edition, and that's going to bring you to the page that you can see on the right. And don't worry that you can't read the text on that page. So the next thing you're going to do is choose a type of business. That's those 6 colorful buttons on the left-hand side there. And one of them is food business, and I think for ag enterprises, that's a great one to select. And then on the right, you're going to enter a location, and it gives you the option to put in a state, a county, a city, or a zip code. So you can, depending on the product that you're thinking about and where you think your customers might be, or where you want to learn more about the customers, if you want to know more about the customers in a neighboring city, if you're deciding if you're going to market there or not, you might enter that city here. And then you're going to go ahead and select Create Report, which is right there in that orange oval. And what that's going to do is kick out a whole series of awesome charts in this report that are going to tell you about the demographics in that area. And these reports will populate with percentages. So they'll tell you the total population, and then for example, they might break that population down into age percentages. So this percentage of people are under the age of 21, and this percentage of people are over the age of 65. And that can be really useful information. I personally like to look at the numbers themselves, the raw data, because when I'm thinking about potential customers, it's easier for me to think about a straight number of people. Well, are there 1,000 people, or are there 500 people? That's a difference that I can wrap my brain around a little bit better. So at the bottom of each of these charts, you'll find a little blue hyperlink to get more information. And what that's going to do is bring up the census data tables themselves. And here, again, you probably can't read the numbers on here, but for this example, I took a screenshot from a data table for Sanders County that's breaking down the population in the county into specific age groups. So if I was thinking about marketing a product in Sanders County that I think is really going to appeal to retired customers, I can look at this chart and count up the number of people over the age of, say, 65 to find out kind of the potential pool of customers there. One thing to keep in mind is that different pieces of information on the census site were collected and compiled at different times. So you always want to check the date associated with each of these tables as you're bringing information up, just to make sure that you're not compiling information from 2 different years that might be as much as 5 or 6 years apart. And it might not be the end of the world to use numbers that were that many years apart, but it's just useful to know when you are doing that, so you know that that's affected your margin of error a little bit. So let's talk about some other sources of information for doing your market research, and these are going to be strategies for finding out information about customers and markets and competition, and we'll get into a little bit some of those tactics for gathering some psychographic and behavioral information as well. So of course, you can collect information directly from customers, either by observing customers in the market or surveying. You can visit markets and look at displays and other products, and again, watch how customers are interacting. You can talk with other farmers who maybe have experience with the kind of production that you're thinking about, or maybe have experience in your market area. And then you can also look at newspapers, magazines, and other media to find some clues from how other products are being marketed, either in your area or other similar products are being marketed. So let's talk about some of these. So we'll start with customer clues. Observing customers. So you can see in the picture here, we've got a crowd of people selecting ears of corn at the farmer's market. So this is a great example of observing how customers interact with products. You can see in this example, the customers are looking for particular traits. They're peeling back the husk on each ear of corn, and they're looking for the one that's just the way that they like their ears of corn. And so you might be able to learn a little bit about what customers are seeking in particular products. You can also notice here that these are customers that really seem to like choice. It's really important with this product for these customers to be able to pick the ear that's just right for them. There's a big crowd around this large display where they get to select their favorites and really take ownership of the ears of corn that they're bringing home. So be a detective and really be observant. What can you learn from watching how they're interacting? You can also observe what other brands your customers use. And this is where we get to access the market research from that other companies have invested heavily in a little bit. So you might notice that customers in your local food market or a particular grocery store that you're thinking about, or wherever you're doing your observation, maybe there are some particular brands that stand out that you notice a lot of them are consuming. So for example here, maybe you notice that most of the people in your marketplace are wearing Patagonia jackets. Or maybe most of the people are wearing Carhartt jackets. And so this can give you an opportunity to benefit from a little bit of that expensive market research that another company has done. The two examples here are pretty par for the course for these two companies. Patagonia tends to market on outdoors, sustainability, adventure-seeking values. There's almost always a scenic shot of a mountain range in the background. This ad might actually be the exception in that the person here is sitting down with their dog rather than climbing a mountain or going for a trail run or something like that. On the right-hand side in the Carhartt ad, we see a fairly typical Carhartt ad where the subject of the ad is almost always working hard and getting things done. There's a real blue-collar element to their marketing. There might be other elements that you observe when you look at ads like this. So remember that these ads are really specifically, strategically targeted based on some expensive psychographic research that these companies have done. So if you notice a standout brand in your marketplace or among your customers, that's a really exciting opportunity to learn a little bit more about things that might appeal to those customers. So customer surveys, it's pretty, a survey is just a chance to directly ask some questions of potential customers. So who might you survey? If you have current customers, they're a great group to survey, especially if you're trying to get information about a new product, some product development that you're working on. You might visit a market that you're considering entering into and survey customers there. It's always good to make sure that you have any permission that you need to survey at a market. But as you can see in the examples here, things like a dot survey or just walking around with a clipboard can be really effective. You might also be able to survey through another business or organization. Maybe you can send a survey out through your church group if you think that that's includes a lot of your target customers. You might also be able to utilize another business. Maybe you're planning to market a meat product and there's a nearby farm that doesn't raise any livestock. Maybe they're selling vegetables, but you know that their customers value local products, and so that's an opportunity to share a survey through their customer email list. Another important thing to think about when surveying is how will you motivate customers to fill out the survey. So the response rates are really challenging anytime you're surveying, and something as little as baking a batch of cookies and offering a cookie to anybody who fills one out, or maybe finding an opportunity to offer a coupon either for your business or through another business can be a great way to increase your response rate and get more useful information. So you can also visit market venues. Here we can see a lot of folks in the produce section, and we talked a little bit about some of the information you can gather by observing how the customers are shopping for produce, but just looking at that market space itself can be useful as well. Which displays are bigger and which displays are smaller? Something that has a larger display at the grocery store is in higher demand because they don't want to have to stock it constantly, so they'll give it more space on the shelf. So that can be useful information about what the displays look like. You also might notice something about how it's displayed that gives you a clue as far as what customers are really looking for in that product. You can also look for what is already being offered and what's not being offered. It's pretty simple to walk around and see if there are products like the one that you're considering in the marketplace. If there aren't, great, that's a market opportunity. Maybe there are, but they're not exactly the same, and that can give you clues as to how you might market your product or what customer wants and needs aren't currently being satisfied by their product options. You can also look specifically at how things are packaged, and this is a great way to learn a little bit about the competition in the market space. So we'll use a jar of pickles as an example here, and maybe you visit the market specifically to look at the pickle aisle because you're thinking about a value-added product for your farm. So a few things that we can learn just by looking at the pickles in the store. The materials, so for the packaging. So pickles are always in a jar. I've never seen a can of pickles that you'd open with a can opener. And that tells us right away that pickles are a come-again product, that consumers want to buy this product and eat some pickles and then be able to put them back in the fridge and come back and eat some more pickles tomorrow or the next day. It's not a single-use product. So the packaging that something's in can tell us about how consumers like to use it. The size of the package can also tell you a little bit about consumer habits or how popular something is. You might notice that dill pickles come in lots of big jars, and some of the other varieties of pickles aren't sold in those large jar sizes, and that can give you some clues about the demand for those products. Claims are a great thing to pay attention to on the products. How is your competition positioning themselves? What are they saying about their product, and what are they not saying that might be an opportunity? You can also learn a little bit about customer expectations from claims. So when we think about pickles, almost every pickle brand is going to have some language on the packaging or image that communicates to the customer that their pickles are crisp, that they snap or they crunch. And you're just going to see that on the majority of the packaging. And whenever you see a claim that's being made by everyone in the market space, that's a good indicator that that's an expectation of the customers. So it's really important to notice when there's a claim being made by everyone that's probably something that your product is going to need to have for customers to be interested at all. But you might also notice that among the claims that are being made, maybe there's one missing. that you could fill. So maybe in your marketplace, nobody's selling a spicy pickle, and you know that other spicy products have done well. So that is an opportunity that you can identify there. So another great way to do some market research is to ask other farmers. Farmers, I think sometimes folks worry about competition and are hesitant to talk with other farmers. And I'll say in my experience, I haven't met many farmers who don't want to talk at all. And you're probably thinking, oh, I know exactly the farmer that you haven't met yet. And so, that's not the farmer to talk to. But the important thing to remember is that there are farmers out there who are happy to talk with somebody who's planning a new enterprise. They're probably not going to tell you the whole playbook, but they'll share some information with you, and it's always useful to hear from people who have done it before. So you might hear what worked for them in your area if you talk to a farmer near you. You might need to reach out to another area if you're thinking about bringing a new product to your marketplace and you want information about marketing that product. You might need to contact somebody who's already been growing it somewhere else. A good resource for finding farmers who are willing to share some information, especially in other areas that you're not as familiar with, is on FarmLink Montana. On the listings map, one of the categories is mentors, and you can find listings there. You can see them in the map picture here. There's a little bit of information about what each of those folks does, and they're listed on there because they're willing to visit with new producers. So that's a great place to search and use the filters to maybe find somebody who can be helpful in your research. And again, if the first person you talk to isn't really interested in sharing the information that you're looking for, don't be discouraged, because there are folks out there who are willing to help. The other place you can look is other media, and this is just a chance to kind of survey ads for similar products. What's been effective? What other opportunities exist? With a beef jerky example here, you'll find a lot of times that generally beef jerky ads are marketing toward folks out in the woods. The Sasquatch is a great example of kind of what all of the characters in these ads tend to look like. Burly, hairy, muscular, real people or creatures of the woods. And so that can tell you, what has been a really effective and tested strategy for these big brands. You also might notice an opportunity that exists there. So the example on the right, Crave Jerky. They noticed that these brands were leaving out a group of consumers who are also interested in a high protein, good energy snack when they're outdoors. But they weren't being marketed to specifically. So you can see here that they're targeting this runner who might want jerky to fuel him in his athletic endeavors. So next up, after doing that segmenting, really learning about the different groups and learning more about them, it's time for targeting. And really simply, targeting is just choosing the segments that you want to market to. So you've identified a lot of different folks through observation and surveying that might be interested in your product. And now you can pick the ones that you think are the best fit for your farm and your goals. One thing to keep in mind is that you don't have to choose just one segment. For example, Mannix Family Grass-Finished Beef is an enterprise that was added to their ranch operation and has a specific segment that it's targeting that's different from the rest of their beef production. And it's not a large enough segment to cash flow the whole business. So they have two different segments for that reason. And a slightly different example, County Rail Farm outside Missoula sells their lettuce mix at the farmer's market and in the grocery store. And those two markets are really different segments for them, and they've learned that some different approaches in terms of packaging between bags and clamshells are more effective. Their marketing strategy is different for those two venues. So the final step in that STP is positioning. Once you've segmented customers and thought about them in a little more detail and chosen the segments that you want to target, now we're going to create a positioning statement to guide your marketing strategy. So what is a positioning statement? So a positioning statement is a simple sentence that describes the benefit that a product provides compared to the competition in its market and gives proof. So let's look at an example here. And this is an example for a hypothetical agritourism product, the Mountain Ranch Cabin. So for the senior hunter, the Mountain Ranch Cabin is the most customizable among all Montana luxury cabins because we have the most booking options. So in this example, we're using a positioning statement template that you can see here to incorporate the different elements that we've talked about so far in this presentation. The target market, the product that you're putting into the marketplace, the point of differentiation and frame of reference, and then we're wrapping up with a reason to believe. So let's look at what those are in our example here. So the target market that this operation has identified is the senior hunter. Their product is the Mountain Ranch Cabin. Their point of differentiation is that theirs is the most customizable. And their frame of reference is Montana luxury cabins. And the reason to believe that they're giving is the most booking options. So let's talk about each of those components in a little bit more detail here. So the target market, remember that's the segment that you selected. So you've looked at the different groups that might want your product, and you've identified the one or the several that you think would be the best fit for your operation and your goals. Remember that you don't need to choose just one one segment when you're targeting. However, if you do choose more than one segment, you're going to want to create a positioning statement for each of those, because you'll market to the different segments in a slightly different way. If you were marketing to them in the same way, they might not actually be different segments. But more likely, if you're not marketing to them in different ways, then you're not being as effective as you can be in your marketing and really standing out and resonating with that customer. So in this case, this ranch chose senior hunters. They might have decided that for a hunting cabin, they're more likely to sell that to an older hunter who's not as interested in camping or getting as far out into the wilderness, and maybe that consumer is later in life and has a little bit more expendable income for a nicer cabin. So the brand or product, this is your niche product. This is the product that you identified using the market growth framework and the 3 C's to look at your customers and operations. It looks like they had an asset on their farm of a cabin space that they can set up to be this hunting lodge of sorts that they might rent via Airbnb or VRBO. So the point of differentiation, remember, this is what makes your product different. So you identified the fit between your operation and your customers, and then thought about how it compares to the rest of the market. So what is the element that you're really focusing on? Is it among price, product, access, or service, and then get even a little bit more specific. What is the thing specifically within that category? So in this case, they decided that their cabin could be the most customizable. We've got lots of different options to suit any hunting trip that you might have planned. Remember that to think about point of differentiation, we have to have a frame of reference. So what are they comparing to? In this case, they're comparing to other Montana luxury cabins. So they don't want to try to make a case for being more customizable than, say, some BLM land where you can drive your RV up and do whatever you want. They might have more restrictions than that setup. But they're targeting a specific customer who's seeking a nicer cabin to stay in on their hunting trip. And so within that frame of reference, they think that they can be the most customizable. And then we conclude with the reason to believe. So how will you show the customer that your point of differentiation is true? So they're the most customizable cabin, and their reason to believe is that when you visit their site to book, they have the most booking options. You can visit other listings and you will not find more booking options. If somebody else puts something in the marketplace with lots of booking options, they would be able to come up with more booking options to hold that position. So why is it important to have a positioning statement? Why would you make this little sentence that you're going to use for your marketing strategy? There's a few reasons here. First, a positioning statement proves that you have a real plan. So if you've thought through all of the elements of marketing your product and have a real strategy, you should be able to easily write down a positioning statement. And if you try to write down a positioning statement and one part of it is hard for you to fill in, that's an area that you might need a little bit more market research, or it might be an area where you're not being as effective in your marketing efforts as you could be. So it's a really great tool to identify where you might need a little bit more work in your marketing plan. It's also a great way to keep your marketing messages clear and focused. So this is going to help you to really recognize the key message that you want the consumers to get about your operation, and stick with it. And it's also going to help you evaluate your marketing decisions. So maybe an opportunity comes up to go to an event and talk about your product. And if you have a positioning statement, you can compare that opportunity to your positioning statement. Will this event get my product in front of my target market? And if it's not, then maybe that's an indication that you want to spend your your time or your travel dollars marketing somewhere else instead. Or maybe it's an indication that you might want to think about a new target segment and how you would market to them more effectively. So what are the keys to a successful positioning statement? It should be simple, memorable, and tailored to your market. So the marketing statement should be memorable, but not directly to customers. The positioning statement is not, it's more of an internal tool. It's not something that you're going to hand to customers so that they can understand your product, but it's something that you'll use to easily write the marketing copy that you will give to your consumers, or to make ads that you're going to share with them. So the more memorable you can make your positioning statement, the more easily you'll be able to use it to create marketing content. It should be easy to understand and different from the competition. So if you have put together a positioning statement and your point of differentiation is something that's complicated, that might not be the best point of differentiation. The more complicated it is, the more time you're going to spend explaining it to customers, and you won't always be successful in explaining it to them. So if you recognize that that point of differentiation is a little bit complicated, you might want to simplify. It needs to be credible and so that you can deliver on the promise. So in our example, we talked about the most booking options. So you need to make sure that you do have the most booking options. And is that something that if competition enters the market with lots of booking options, will you be able to increase yours to hold that position? And that leads into owning the position. You really want a positioning statement that describes a position that you can own. So you don't want to market on how customizable your product is if there's a high likelihood that somebody else entering the market could easily be just as customizable and potentially even outdo you. That's going to be a pretty weak positioning statement. You also want to leave room for growth. Make sure that you're not boxing your products or your operation in. So lastly, I want to really quick talk about the lean startup model. And this is something that we use with our clients here at CFAC. The lean startup model really simply is just mapping out your idea like we've talked about today, getting lots of feedback, and then testing it out on a small scale with the minimum viable product. And that term is not super important, but the main thing to remember is the minimum viable product just refers to the smallest test run that you can make. So in the picture here on the side, this example is a grower who was raising a small amount of lavender, and it's sort of on a garden scale, and she was sharing it with some friends, and one of them mentioned to her that that she knew somebody who was selling lavender and had mentioned that they were looking for more. Well, she got in touch with that person, and they were really excited to meet another lavender grower because their capacity was maxed out, and they had demand for more lavender from some different customers. So using the minimum viable product, this grower grew a very small amount, didn't start by putting several acres of lavender in until she had learned a little bit more about the production systems, but also what it was that the customers wanted. So growing some lavender and making some bundles and getting them into the hands of customers to get that feedback, find out what they liked and didn't like about different bunches of lavender or varieties of lavender, so that when they were ready to scale up, which they're actually in the process of doing this past season and this coming season, they can be really confident in that investment and launching that product into the marketplace because of the feedback that they've received. So this is not rocket science. This is a really simple strategy, but it can be really effective, and it can really protect you from the risk of bringing new products into the marketplace. And it's a great way to start out one of these ideas. Just some opportunities here for testing out your minimum viable product. Free samples for family and friends. You might try sharing it through a club or organization, or setting up a little sale table at your church group. If you're thinking agritourism, you might find one of those organizations or a local nonprofit who's interested in putting on a one-off event before you go into the regular fishing guide business or hunting hosting business or something like that. Maybe you have a skeet shooting event at your ranch first, and then in a lot of cases, just booking a slot at the farmer's market for one weekend can be a great way to just try selling your product and getting some direct feedback. Thanks so much. Good luck in your niche marketing efforts, and if you want some more information or have any other questions, feel free to contact me or the rest of the folks on the BFR team at CFAC anytime. My contact information is right there on the screen.